Magalhaes to Stokes, who's onside. 1-0.
Here's Sims. It's a good serve this from Southampton. They could finish the job here. It's Shane Long, and he has done it.
Just a minute to play. That's stoppage time. Here's Letizia. Who better to say farewell than one of the finest players ever to wear the red and white.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Saints FC podcast. This week we have a very, very special guest on the show as I get the opportunity to speak to former Saints captain and legend that is Claus Lundekvam. Now, I must issue a little bit of a warning before you listen to this episode, because Claus had a very interesting time of his life after he left Southampton, and we speak about that in some detail, and it is a conversation kind of best left for the grown-ups. So if there are any sensitive ears, if you don't really fancy getting into kind of slightly adult and depressing stories, then it's probably best to leave this episode for a time, perhaps in a maybe more suitable location or at a more suitable time. But those of you that don't mind getting down into the detail of Claus's life at Saints and afterwards, and all the ups and downs and trials and tribulations, do listen in. And of course, please let us know what you think of the episode. Email us saintsfcpodcasts@gmail.com or tweet us at saintsfcpodcast. Well, I'm going to rewind in time now and go back to when I made a call to Claus. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Saints FC podcast. I am humbled and delighted, feeling a little bit nervous and excited because we have someone who is undeniably a Saints legend on the line here. Calling us, we've got Claus Lundekvam on the line. So, I mean, Claus, I could say so many things about you and your Saints career. I mean, you spent 12 years at Southampton from 1996 to 2008. I mean, I started supporting Saints in the 1990s. I still do today. So, I mean, almost probably more than half of my Saints supporting life, you were just there in the centre of our defence. Over 350 appearances for the club after joining for £400,000 back in 1996, which is amazing. You've also got 40 appearances for your national side for Norway. You have many of those appearances as captain for Southampton, but in all those appearances you only managed 2 goals, which we might get onto a little bit later and find out why it took you so long to get there. But Claus, I mean, if you were to meet a Saints fan who maybe only started supporting Saints in the last 10 years and didn't know about you, how would you describe yourself and your Saints career?
Well, first of all, it's very nice to join you all, and I feel humble as well, and very feel privileged to have such a long Saints career as I had. It was a wonderful time of my life, and I'm very proud of my career at Southampton. So it's nice to join you and catch up with some my beloved Saints fans. Describing my career is, if we can start with the goals, that will be short and sharp. Now I've just so many great memories, John, from my career. All the friendships I've developed over the years with players. Most of them I keep in contact with. But all the years, obviously the first few years I came over was tough. It was hard. We were sort of fighting relegation every year. and but so many, the FA Cup final, my testimonial, so many great victories I can sort of look back at, and makes me humble and proud, really.
Brilliant. So, I mean, let's go back a little bit in time. I'm interested in knowing what life was like for you before Southampton, and I don't know if you're aware of that ugly inside, but they're kind of a Southampton fanzine which started in the 1980s with kind of photocopied handouts which they gave out and sold at the ground, and they now have a YouTube channel and everything. But they've just messaged me, and they said they wondered who was your football inspiration whilst you were growing up in Norway.
Well, I grew up as a Liverpool fan because of the 80s when I was sort of youngish. And my grandmother was born and raised in Liverpool, so I've got a little bit of Scouser blood in me. So Liverpool was my team, and I remember, funny enough, Souness and Dalglish and all those, and it's a bit ironic that it was Souness who bought me, so it's like a fairy tale. But growing up, I was obviously following the English football, the English league. Was huge in Norway, and there's always been like that in Scandinavia with the Premier League and the tradition of English football. But Liverpool was my team. But my sort of idols and heroes when I grew up was Diego Maradona. He was the main player.
Yeah, well, of course, I don't think we can argue with that. There's still a lot of bitter people in England who think about Diego Maradona and his hand of God, but I mean, undeniably, what a talent, and
what a player!
And I suppose a great choice if you're going to have a footballer to inspire you. In terms of talent, you can't go much further than Maradona, can you?
No, you can't. And I was lucky enough to play a friendly, like a show game against him. About 5-6 years ago back in Oslo, and even though he didn't move very much, he still had the unbelievable talent. You can see his touch and his technique was unbelievable. So what a player.
And how did it feel meeting your football idol? Because I mean, I get a little bit starstruck when I meet some of these ex-Saints players. Talking on the phone, I had the butterflies in the tummy before I called you and spoke to you, because wow, it's Claus Lundekvam, and lots of people have just said they're very jealous of me to get this opportunity. And I had the same when I met Matt Letizia. I think the first time I met him, I couldn't even speak. But how did you find meeting Maradona?
Well, I was a bit starstruck, obviously, having him as a world idol. It was just unbelievable as a player. When you meet him, he's a humble guy, and we all are as footballers. We are normal people. But obviously, meeting Diego Maradona for the first time obviously was huge. But I'd obviously grown up in Norway on a little fishing village on an island. For me to come to the Premier League and sort of meet all the superstars, all the teams, all the Arsenals and Man United and all the big teams, I was all of a sudden there. Obviously, you have a lot of respect for these players you've only seen and heard of. But obviously, I wasn't afraid. I was just very, very lucky to and privileged to be there and competing against the best.
And so, I mean, being a Liverpool fan when you were growing up, do you remember the first time you played at Anfield with Saints, and how did that feel?
I remember it really well. It was only my second game. My debut was home against Nottingham Forest at the Dell. We drew 2-2, and we had a Tuesday evening game on floodlights at Anfield, and that was just unbelievable. All of a sudden, I was there, growing up as a Liverpool fan, going at Anfield, listening to the Kop singing "You Never Walk Alone." It was, yeah, it was undescribable. It was just, yeah, you can imagine my nerves. I was only a young kid. It was very, very special. And I got sort of a funny story there. Obviously, growing up as a Liverpool fan, the old sort of entrance to the Anfield, you walk down and there's, as everybody knows, it's a sign, this is Anfield. And I had to touch it when I walked down the stairs to the pitch. And I just heard back behind me some of the kit man, I think it was Malcolm Taylor, Woggy, Klaus, what the fuck you doing? So that was only my second game in the Premier League. So yeah, welcome to. I was all of a sudden there. I was just unbelievable.
Oh, you played in a victory at Anfield as well, didn't you? I mean, what did it feel like to beat Liverpool at Anfield? Did you touch the sign on your way in that time, or did you realise that wasn't going to bring you luck?
So that was only once. So now I think most of the away grounds I had victories, apart from I think the Old Highbury and Old Trafford. But taking 3 points at Anfield is something special, yeah, of course it was. So many unbelievable memories to look back at.
Yeah, and let's track back a little bit. So, when you got the call to say Southampton were interested in you, I mean, what happened? Was it your agent that phoned you? Did you get a call from Graeme Souness himself? How did that all happen?
It was my agent. It was Rune Hauge at the time, even though he was suspended, I think, at the time. But he was my agent. So it was a Danish guy who I kept in contact with. I've only broke through as I've played a couple of years for the under-21s in Norway and came through the ranks in Brandbergen. And it went really quickly, and I knew there was quite a few clubs interested in me and a few other Brandbergen players at the time. But when I heard, I had some German clubs interested, I know, and when I heard obviously Southampton and the Premier League, a Premier League club was interested, there was something very exciting for me. And the transfer was over and done with really quickly, actually. I think Southampton came over once, and the second time they came over, Graeme Souness and Laurie McMenemy came over and watched me, and we made a deal that evening on a little fish market in Bergen. I will never forget it.
Oh wow! I mean, that almost sounds like a dream for most people to go and have dinner with Graeme Souness and Laurie McMenemy and talk about football, but to have that kind of prospect of moving to the Premier League as well. I mean, so once you knew Graeme Souness was watching you in the stands, I mean, how did you cope with that pressure?
I was maybe a little bit more nervous than usual, but I don't think my nerves has ever sort of hindered me or put restrictions on my performances. The older Southampton supporters know I was sort of a very calm and collective centre half. Even though I was very nervous, and the nerves you must have to perform. But obviously I was very, very excited to know that the legend of Laurie McMenemy and Graeme Souness was watching me. Even more so when I met them after the game and we had a meal in town. And I was actually a Southampton player that evening. So I was obviously quite fearless and sort of maybe a bit naive at the time, and I I was very, very determined of proving myself in the Premier League, and I will probably say it's the toughest, most competitive league in the world. So, and like I said, all of a sudden I was there competing against the best.
Yeah, and you weren't the only Norwegian player that Souness signed, were you? Because about a month after he signed you, he brought in Egil Ostenstad. I mean, did you know Egil before, or?
Yeah, I knew Egil obviously through the national team, and obviously we played against each other quite a few times in the domestic league in Norway. So I knew of Egil, not as a very personal friend, but obviously we became very good friends the years he was at Southampton, and we actually had Tor André Flo as well on trial with Southampton at the time, which we didn't sign. He went back to Norway. He was playing for Bandbergen at the time, and Chelsea signed him a few months later. So I remember that, yeah.
The one that got away there. And you think instead Graeme Souness also signed Ali Dia that season as well, didn't he?
Well, shambles that was.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the story from Matt Letitia before, but let's have your angle on that, because that must have just been totally bizarre.
It was. We couldn't believe it, really. The problem was we never saw him in training. He never had the sort of time to. We just heard that we've signed him, and he was an unbelievably talented prospect who's come in, and was obviously linked with George Weah at the time. So we had high expectations for him, but we never saw him in training. So when he was subbed on half time, I remember the game. I think it was subbed of Matt Letitia at the time as well. It only took his second involvement in the game. We saw that this is not working, and being subbed off again, and we never saw him again.
Yeah.
He was gone. So that was it, really. And he ran from all the hotel bills and everything. So never been heard again.
I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. I mean, what a blagger! You know, I would absolutely love to get him on this podcast and hear his side of the story. You know, if anyone still knows
know
him,
where he is?
I have no idea whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, he nearly scored. I mean, that's the amazing thing. He had a fantastic opportunity, but you know, unsurprisingly, he didn't put it away. So just one last thing before we move on to a little bit later on in your Saints career and kind of progress through the seasons. The first kind of really impressive win for your Saints career was when Southampton beat Manchester United 6-3. I mean, how did you feel in the run up to that? I mean, you couldn't have possibly believed that you were going to beat them like that.
No, obviously, having all the big teams, this was my first season in '96, obviously, and having Manchester United coming down, they were sort of winning everything at the time. So we were massive underdogs. But I learned very quickly that the Dell was no one liked to come down and play against us at the Dell. So we had the sort of advantage, very intimidating for even the big teams to come down and play. And we were really fired up for those sort of big games against the big teams. So it was just unbelievable to obviously. It was an end-to-end game with 9 goals. It's just unbelievable. I think I had an assist in the game as well. But it was just frantic, and to beat such a massive team with so many unbelievable players that they had at the time, with Beckham and sort of Cantona and all the Roy Keane was sent off with a tackle and sort of knee height on me, I remember, straight red. It was some fantastic memories. And I remember coming in and dressing room after, and what the hell just happened? was just fantastic. It's one of those moments I will never forget.
Yeah. And then obviously the following season when, Manchester United promised that it would never happen again, and then for Saints to go out and beat them 3-1. Did that almost feel even better than the 6-3?
Yeah, because then you obviously you know that they were fired up for that one, and they brag about it. It's not going to happen again with such a big team with so much quality. And when you then beat them, you sort of you're even more proud then. So that was quite an achievement. But we beat most of the big teams coming down to the Dell. I remember even Liverpool. I think we beat 2-3 years running at the Dell, and it was a fortress, and it was very intimidating. And like I said, we had a very, very even though we were fighting relegation every year. I remember at the Dell, we managed to pull through, and we had some unbelievable great escapes. I remember.
Yeah, and I mean, in your time at Southampton and the Dell, and then at St Mary's a little bit later on as well. I mean, you played under so many different managers. I think I've counted at least a dozen that I think you must have played under, and the number of different Southampton players you must have played with, I think must run into the hundreds. I mean, I wonder, out of all of your central defensive pairings, who was the player or the players that you loved playing alongside the most? Who did you feel kind of most comfortable with and feel like you had a real understanding with?
I think most of the centre back pairings I had was I was comfortable with most of them. But obviously, having a good run with a central defender, which and you sort of fulfill each other very well. It's not only it's not given. So I formed some very good partnerships. I feel over the many years I was at Southampton, and obviously when I came to the club, Ken Munko was there. We had quite a few games together. He was a good player. But probably the ones that I remember the most is obviously Dean Richards, who rest in peace. Dean, he was really sad too. I was at Molineux and saying goodbye to him that game. I remember. I still think of that. So he was a very good friend, and obviously when he left for Tottenham. I remember he phoning me and thanking me for the good partnership we had. So that was something special. But then later on, I formed an unbelievable partnership with Michael Svensson, the killer, which I'm still in contact with. I think we were made for each other as centre halves. I was sort of the laid back one and sort of reading of the game, and he was compromising hard, and we had a very, very good understanding at the time. And we had that back four, I think, with including Anthony Amy, was with Jason Dodd, Wayne Bridge on the left back, me and Michael. Our centre halves was a very strong defence.
I think a lot of Saints fans would dream of having that defence at its peak again. I mean, my word, what force that would be. I mean, interestingly, Shirley Mush, who's one of our listeners, he wrote in and said, who was the better centre-back partner? Was it Killer or was it Dino? And he obviously thought it would be one of those two. Okay, so I mean, one of the things that you've talked about Michael Svensson and in your kind of almost love affair in the centre of defence with him. He gave me a comment. He said, "It took me a couple of games to get my first goal for Saints, yet it took Klaus years to get his. I gave him a lot of stick for that." Is that true? Is that what he was like?
It's very true. It's very true. I've taken so much stick over the years, even now, of my goal scoring record, and rightly so. Yeah, I think it took me 6 years. And I only managed to get two, but one away and one at home. Funny enough, it was against the same manager who used to manage me. It was Paul Jones. So no, Dave Jones. I mean,
yeah, Dave
it was
Jones,
Paul
yeah.
Jones in goal at Molineux when I scored my first Premier League goal there. So now I think my whole goal scoring record was a bit of a shambles. Yeah, but it was a mental thing. I sort of in training I was quite I wouldn't say lethal, but I was scoring quite a few goals in training, and I've always been a sort of attacking player with skills, and we're going up. And I think I've taken a lot of comments, and I remember this guy, Sports Reporters, mentioned me live in a game when I came up and said live on the air, why does he bother? So well, it was mostly a decoy, but it was a mental thing for me because in my own 16-yard box, I was all so determined to defend with everything I had. When I sort of went up in the opposition's 16-yard box, it was not really my job. So I think that was sort of it should have been, but with my height and sort of ability in the air, I should have scored a lot more goals. No doubt about it, but it was not my sort of speciality.
I think Letizia once described you as being like Alan Hansen, very uncomfortable in front of his own goal, but less comfortable in front of the opposition's. But
yeah.
I mean, Neil Langridge is another one of our listeners. He kind of actually asked, well, you've kind of already answered it a little bit, as what was your role in the tactics for attacking free kicks and corners? And he asked, how often did you score them in training?
Yeah, I wasn't, after a few years, obviously the managers and my teammates knew that I wasn't prolific in front of goal. So but I was always part of the setup offensively for free kicks and corners, and but mostly as drag the big people away, making room for the others.
And then how did it feel when you finally got that goal against Wolves? I mean, I wonder, this is a question that a lot of our fans have asked. There's Saints Mike, he liked to ask that question. Also, I want to kind of add to that. Did you have something against Dave Jones? The fact that you got only two of your goals, both against teams that he managed. And after, I think he gave you nearly 100 appearances for Southampton when he was manager.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. I love Dave Jones. He was really a player's manager. He was a good man. So that was nothing personal. It was just a little freaky coincidence, really. That he was the manager of Wolverhampton at the time, and when he came to the Dell in the Championship with Cardiff. But I can promise it was nothing personal. It wasn't. But I was scoring my first Premier League goal at Molineux. I think I was in shock. Obviously, I sort of reacted on impulse and just pure reaction from across a free kick. I think it was flicked on by Kevin Phillips, if I remember rightly, and I just dived in there and I put my foot on it, and in it went. And everyone who watched it, I just stood there, probably in shock. And I remember running all the way over across the whole pitch because our away supporters were on the other side. So that was a special moment.
Yeah. Fantastic, and I think it's going to live long in the memory of many, many Saints fans, especially the ones that made the trip up to Molineux. I want to ask you about the managers that you've played under. So we've mentioned Graeme Souness a fair bit, and Dave Jones as well. But I mean, you've also been managed by Glenn Hoddle, Stuart Gray, Gordon Strachan, Steve Wigley, Paul Sturrock, Harry Redknapp, even Dave Bassett and Dennis Wise for a few games, George Burley, Jason Dodd, I think, had a couple of games in charge as well. And then I think you finished. Did you finish playing for Saints whilst Nigel Pearson was the manager, or did you kind of injured at that point? I mean, out of those, who do you want to pick out and tell us a little story about?
Like you said, it's many, and I think I'm very glad I had so many managers, because you learn something from every one of them, good or bad, how they sort of approached the team and how they sort of how they set up, and the people they got involved. Obviously, there's a few managers who will always be more special than others because of the results you're getting. Like I said, as a player, I remember Dave Jones very well, and I liked him as a person. He was a very good man. He was sort of a manager I wanted to play for and give everything you got. But later on, I remember Glenn Hoddle very well, very, very good tactically, and we were sort of very prepared for every game. I remember him maybe not as good with the players individually. And I remember obviously Gordon Strachan as one of the years of the highlights of my career. Because I was probably on those years peak of my career in 2003 to 2005. I won the sort of PFA Player of the Year 2 years running in Norway, and we had 2 top 10 finishes in the Premier League plus an FA Cup final on the Gordon Strachan. But it's many. And I've learned something valuable of every one of them. I feel very privileged to get to know so many strong footballing characters. Even Gordon now, Harry Redknapp, I would say, as a good friend. He came over when I was working with the Premier League football in TV2 in Norway. He came over with a few others, with Gordon Strachan and Graeme Souness. So I've managed to keep in touch with them. So I've had very good relationships with all of the managers, really.
What was your first impression of Gordon Strachan? Because I think, for people who have English as a first language, sometimes it can be hard enough to understand him, and he certainly seems quite eccentric. I imagine him being quite a tough manager. Sometimes the stuff that he says is bizarre, but he was obviously an incredibly talented manager. I mean, the way we saw Saints playing under him was really fantastic. But what was it like playing for him, and what was your first impression? Did you think, oh my God, what is this guy about when he showed up at Southampton?
I can honestly say that when he came in, I wouldn't say I hated him, but I didn't like very much of him because he was running us every day. It was really, really hard and was really strict. But as a human being, as a person, I learned to know him, and he was the fairest man, the fairest manager you ever meet, really. And he was really, really good and getting the most out of the players. And we hadn't, when the years he was there, he wasn't. We didn't have the biggest squad of players, and I think we had the most consistent run we've ever had when I was there, and that was down to Gordon, really, because I think he got us so fit we sort of hated him the first few months because Monday, Tuesday, he kept running us box to box, and but later on we saw the benefits of it because we were winning games later on, and we were very, very hard to beat. We were very well organised, and we more or less kept the same team every game. We were a very strong side, very, very tough to beat. So when you get the results, even though you have a tough sort of manager and his approach to how we managed us, we loved it. We loved it, and I loved Gordon. He was a very good man. He was very fair. If you did your job to the best of your ability, he was behind you all the way. So I'll always remember Gordon as a very good man, human being, but also a very good manager.
I wonder, do you remember when Gordon Strachan made a comment after you'd been stretchered off against Leicester City, and he was asked if you were unconscious or not, and he said, "Well, I don't have a clue. That's what he's always like."
Yeah, but I remember that. He's got a few good quotes on me. I think I was useful as a dead body in the box. So, but I think that just proves that we learned to know him, and we had this sort of he could say things like that because it was. I wasn't offended about it, and I was sort of throwing away, even though I tried my best, but that was not my strength really. So, and I was laid back, and I was sort of comfortable on the ball, and I wasn't very often very stressed. So, but that was some of my qualities as well.
So, Claus, I mean, I don't think we can get through this conversation if we don't talk about some of the absolute highlights and under Strachan. Can you tell us about that FA Cup run and what it felt like?
First of all, to just be involved in an FA Cup final. Me growing up in Norway, watching the English League, and then obviously the FA Cup being the oldest, most historic domestic cup competition in the world is something very, very special. And it's one of those matches and moments, and all the weeks leading up to it was just something I will never forget. And what I sort of remember mostly about it is the whole city, the whole of Southampton, all the supporters and yellow and blue filling the Millennium Stadium. They were standing there for sort of hours after the game. But leading up to it, I remember really well the semi-final at Villa Park against Watford. That was a special sort of game as well, winning that, and then on our way to an FA Cup final, and I think we had 2 or 3 weeks waiting for the cup final. And those weeks, and the whole Southampton was sort of in so high expectations and sort of buzzing the whole city. And there was, as a player, to be involved in an FA Cup final, loving the city as much as I did, Southampton fans and everyone involved was something I will always treasure for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a magical time as a fan, really, going through that. And I've spoken to a few of your ex-colleagues that played in that, and I mean, Brett Ormerod was talking about it. Michael Svensson talked about it. Paul Jones had obviously a very different experience of it because he was gutted that he was dropped, but then he had the kind of being the only goalkeeper to be subbed on in a final. And all of your ex-colleagues and teammates kind of talk about that day and that run, as a kind of really magical time. I mean, I suppose the other thing that we've got to get to, I mean, if that was the highlights, obviously, was the lowest point getting relegated from the Premier League?
Yeah, obviously, that's that season was horrible. Really, it was a really low of for me personally and for the whole team. When you've been there such a long time, as I was lucky enough to be at Southampton, I was been captain for quite a few years, and to see your team getting relegated was really devastating, and it really hurt me, and it took me a long time to sort of recover from it. It was tough, but we were lacking the sort of togetherness that season. We had too many splits in the team, and we had so many too many arguments, and we were not pulling together. So I think coming to the end of it, getting beat by Manchester United, I think the last day of the season we had sort of a chance to stay up. I think we were relegated weeks before. But yeah, it was a surreal experience really to be there with so much Southampton in your heart to go down. It's dreadful. It was horrible.
And was that the difference? Was it the team togetherness? I mean, you talked about, you accepted Gordon Strachan joking about you, and obviously there seemed like a really great team spirit in that team that got to the FA Cup final, and Ormerod and Beattie seemed to be a match made in heaven. You and Killer seemed to be a match made in heaven, and we had those sort of partnerships and team spirit across, and that was that the difference between a team that can get to the cup final with a largely similarly talented squad as one that can get relegated?
Yeah, I think in football, so many years ago, and you've experienced in life and in general, that the sort of togetherness you need in all sort of team sports, it's crucial. Pulling together and having a sort of a together belief of what you're trying to achieve is crucial. It's so crucial. And I think the season we got relegated was. I think also we had injuries, and we were maybe a little bit unlucky, but we didn't have that sort of closeness. We didn't have that dressing room that's needed to actually get the best out of each other. We had too many sort of strong personalities as well, who was more sort of, I would say, maybe conscious about their own performances than playing each other's. What we had the first few years, and I learned so much about in football terms, is the first years I was at Southampton when we played at the Dell, and I think on paper we were sort of relegated every year. If you look at the squad we had, the quality, one thing we did have was a fighting spirit. We were willing to die for each other, and we had a dressing room who was just unbelievable, looking after each other. And I think that is so important. And we managed to stay up every year, and pulling each other through, and learning each other, not only on the pitch but outside the pitch. And I think those relations you build as friends, as footballers, it's very, very important to succeed, even in team sports. So and I learned very, very much, and through my whole career, internationally and in life in general, it's to perform well personally. You need good players around you, and good people around you. And I think somebody needs a kick in the arse, and I got it very often from. I remember Jason Dodd kicking me up the arse all the time because I needed it, because he knew me. He knew that I would respond to that positively. But somebody needed an arm around the shoulder to maybe give him comfort and sort of belief again. So, the relegation season, I think we had too many players for their own good.
Yeah.
And then you won't achieve as a team.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you talk about that team spirit and that togetherness, and I've heard lots of the other players talk about it, and I've heard it kind of referred to as almost blitz spirit, which is obviously a very British term for kind of people when you feel like you're in something together and you're willing to do things for for people that aren't related to you, aren't necessarily friends, but you're all in it together. Now, Claus, I've read a fair bit about your life after football, and quite a lot of our listeners have as well. And Alex McInnes, who kind of wrote and he said, did you feel that your personal problems and lifestyle were any way linked to the relegation in 2005? I mean, I've got another question which I want to add to that. Was it the kind of lack of that team togetherness which led to your problems after football? And I think for those listeners who maybe aren't familiar with this story, can you tell us what happened in your life after you left football?
Yeah, of course. I've been very honest and open about my struggles after I retire, and my difficulties with addiction and sort of depression. And yeah, what I sort of can recognise looking back, and I've sort of looked back so many times and sort of thought, was there anything different I could have done? I probably could have, but I ended up making a few bad decisions, and I was all of a sudden in a really dark spot, really, and I found myself struggling to cope. But I think the most important elements of me finding it difficult and sort of going into depression was losing what I've just been talking about, losing the dressing room, losing the day-to-day sort of life of getting up, getting into training, to meet my friends, my teammates, and I think I missed that so much that I've sort of was struggling to. You feel a sort of hopelessness of what should I do now. But I thought when I retired after my testimonial that I was set up for life. I was I should be very happy and proud, and I had the whole life in front of me, but I was not happy, and that was when the depression sort of crept in, and I think having something meaningless to go to, that sort of was taken away from me, and I missed that so much that I found it very, very difficult, and I was sort of chasing the sort of adrenaline, because you can't really replace running out to 20 to 50,000 people every week. That's just impossible. The adrenaline kick and sort of all the acknowledgements of being who you are and everything, and all of a sudden it's gone, or at least you feel it's gone, and you feel lonely and sort of alone, and in your own isolation, really. And in some elements it's difficult to explain, but I think the loss of what I've said of the dressing room, the day-to-day meaningness of life, really was taken away from me, and I found that very, very difficult. And like I said, I made some bad decisions. I found more and more partying was sort of covering my day-to-day, was sort of being being me, of forgetting really. I think more than anything else, and then that developed into sort of more prescription drugs, and later on a lot of cocaine use, which I was struggling with for a few years, and all this really ended up nearly killing me a few times. It was really bad, and was some horrendous dark times.
And did you have any, family and friends who could see that your life was starting to, spiral out of control, and perhaps it started with a few parties, and then lots of parties, and then drinking and taking drugs, all day, every day? I mean, how did your close friends and family feel about it, or did you just become alienated from them?
I think my ego, my sort of my inner image of myself, and I was always been the proud one who wasn't allowed to show weaknesses, and I think deep inside I knew I had a problem, and I wasn't happy, and I think my family and my closest friends, a lot of my teammates recognized that I was struggling, and they tried to help me, and I remember it so well today that I had so many close, good friends and teammates who saw that I was not happy, and I was drinking too much. I was using narcotics, and I was not good. But I think for me, I was already in that bubble at the moment, at the time, and I couldn't sort of do anything about it. I was trapped in a way, and I think not sort of recognize what sort of issues I had. Even it took me years to learn really, and I now had to break down so many times, and with a sort of heart attack and overdose, and I didn't want to live. I tried to kill myself, and it was really, really bad. I hadn't really surrendered, because I felt in a way that I was in control, and that was obviously after I was so far down, and I've given up all hope really, and then my sort of my tears came, and I couldn't really justify killing myself or go away with my two beautiful daughters and my family around me who loved me, and I was just it just felt hopeless. I was so lost. But luckily, after months and months struggling, and then sort of half trying to get out of it, I've given up, and I was sort of crying relentless of being where I was. I got eventually the help I needed, and it's taken me many years to sort of learn about me, myself, and find the little boy again, Claus again, and his values in life, and I've always been a nice sort of humble little kid, but I think being in the spotlight for so many years, so I was, it did something with me as well, and I think all the sort of proud in me is put me. It took longer to sort of break that down for me to get help, which made it worse really.
Yeah.
But in the years after as well, I needed sort of confirmation of being sort of a drug addict and alcoholic. So it was really tough for the for many years after.
Yeah.
After I retire, I'm just very, very lucky, but very incredibly proud of where I am today.
Yeah. And how did you
Perspective
find that? How did you find that redemption? You know, what did it take to pick yourself up off the floor from the absolute pits of depression and addiction? You know, what is it that made you kind of almost kind of step out and look at yourself and make that decision, and who helped you do that?
There's been a lot of people helping me, and there's been a lot of good footballing friends who's helped me, who's known me, and a lot of them is Southampton players, which I will ever be grateful for, and they know who they are. Obviously, yeah, I just feel everything today is just looking back. It's in a way it's been my sort of destiny in a way, and it's given me an enormous amount of perspective of what's important in life. And I wouldn't wish my worst enemy going through what I went through of the addiction side of things, because it's horrible. It's and I've seen it kill so many people, and that's one of the reasons in my sort of autobiography I've called it sort of my toughest game ever, and that's the title of it. It's been the hardest game I've ever had to play to survive addiction and to come out of depression and sort of be where I am today, because the downfall where I was, being sort of standing there at my testimonial, being sort of looked up to by so many thousand fans, to where I was sort of a year later, it's just unbelievable. Yeah, it's just crazy. So it's been a very long, tough road to where I am today. But obviously, I'm very, very proud and lucky and privileged to be where I am today. And I've been clean for 3.5, nearly 4 years now, and I've found a sort of a life that I appreciate so much, with a completely different perspective of what's important.
Yeah. And Klaus, I mean, I know friends that suffer with depression. You know, I've had a kind of small bout of it myself before, and I know friends that have dealt with addiction, and I'm sure there's plenty of our listeners that have similar issues. Is there a message that you could say to those people, or something? How if someone's feeling depressed or is struggling with addiction and listening to this, what can they do to, you know, get to the stage where you are and be looking back at it as a problem that sits in the past rather than the present?
I think my best advice, and I got no answers to what it should be or what it shouldn't be. You need to find your own sort of path to get out of it. But for me, it was to get sort of addiction free, or to get clean, was hard enough. But that was maybe the easiest part. But to live clean with all your thoughts and feelings afterwards was the difficult part. The day-to-day life after the years of addiction, with all the sort of guilt and the shame you carry with it, and everyone you've sort of let down, was the difficult part. I think patience is a key word. I think you need to find yourself something meaningful to go to every day. You need to find something social that you feel sort of included in something meaningful. I think we all need that. Whatever you sort of, whoever you are, whatever you do, you need something social, a workplace, or some people that care really. And for me, that was one of the main things. I needed to find a new path for myself. And it's taken me years to sort of experience what I needed for me and myself, and it's been very, very, very tough. But Jesus Christ, I've learned so much about myself and life in general.
And I can, thank you on behalf of all of our listeners, and probably everyone's going to come across this story and the story that you've shared before with interviews, and just say thank you for opening up on that. I have a feeling I might have a few listeners that might complain that they were chopping onions during this episode and had to go reach for the tissues or wipe away a tear there, because it's really it's a tough story to hear, but an important one.
Yeah, I think so. It's real life, and we are sort of we've maybe been a bit admired for being the successful footballers we have been, and so privileged and lucky we've been. But we are normal human beings, and I think my story is not unique. Not at all. I found it very hard to be obviously in the public eye and being very honest and sort of and open about it. But I'm very, very glad today I've done so. I've written a book, a very honest and open book about all my proud football career, and but also these things because I think there's a important message for many, and it's so much stigmatizing around and taboo around the sort of mental part of our general health and the addiction side of things, that you're more people that who can talk about it, the more we can help.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of us Saints fans are eagerly awaiting the day that there's the English edition of your book, and it's going to be great to read that when we finally get there, and of course we'll give that a big shout out when it is ready for that. Claus, should we move on to some listener questions and try and lighten the mood before we finish this interview? So I've got a whole load of very quick fire questions here, so I want you to kind of just very, very quickly answer them without thinking too much, okay? So these coming from Ben Shaw. So your favourite manager that you played under?
Gordon Sack.
And your least favourite manager to play under?
Glenn Hoddle.
Which teammates are you still in contact with? I think there's going to be hundreds here. So, which teammate are you most in contact with? Who do you speak to most regularly?
Anders, Michael Svensson, Marcelo Tessier, Wayne Bridge, Jason Dodd, James Beattie, Brett Ormond.
I would absolutely. I think it'd probably be my dream to sit around a sofa and chat the night away with that group of players. I mean, half of my heroes in one sentence there. Okay, worst away ground to play at?
Old Trafford.
Most difficult striker you played against?
Thierry Henry.
Strongest personality in the dressing room?
Jason Dodd, Chris Marston, in a positive way.
Okay. Which Saints player would you have least liked to play against?
I would say Matt.
Yeah. It's one of a kind, Matt Lettis, isn't it? When you have like Xavi and Guardiola as the admirers.
Even though I had him in my pocket every training, he was unbelievable.
I don't know whether to believe that or not, Klaus, because the amount of ex-players that have said, we were never surprised when he scored those goals on the pitch because we saw what he did in the in training sessions, which was even more audacious.
He was special.
Okay, here's one. Try not to be too rude. One word to describe our friends from down the road, Portsmouth Football Club.
Who, the scum?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's just kind of wrap up with a couple more little questions. Upside Down Saint, he's based in Australia. He's asking, when are you going to come and visit him in Brisbane?
I would love to come to Australia for a barbecue.
There we go. Upside Down Saint, get that sorted. Get your invite across to Klaus, and he's up for a barbie. Russell Pope wonders, what are your thoughts on our new Norwegian signing, Mohamed Elianusi?
He's decent. I've followed him a few years. He's a good player. He's an honest, hard-working player, and he's got some good skills. So I'm excited of how he's gonna if he's gonna succeed in the Premier League. But he's got some good qualities.
Brilliant. And Hursty Boy says, can you get your boots back on and show us how to defend properly?
I would love to, but I'm afraid I will only last about 4 minutes, I think.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about getting into management or coaching?
Yeah, I've sort of done jobs, and I run a football academy in Bergen at the moment, apart from my main work. I still think I've got a lot to... so much love for the game, and I think I've got a lot to through my experience and knowledge. But we will see. I'm a good life at the moment, so okay. I love working with young players. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. And now for our standard silly question that our friend Les's Lamborghini always messages in. He gets upset when I call them silly questions. Apparently they give him a real insight into the personality and what the man is made of. So with that in mind, Klaus, would you rather be fluent in all languages, every language spoken in the world, and never be able to travel, or be able to travel anywhere for a year but never be able to learn a single word of a different language?
Ooh, difficult. But I think I will choose the one I'd be allowed to travel.
Yeah.
To see.
Absolutely. He also adds, can you also thank him for being such a superb and loyal player and skipper? And I think I probably echo all of the Saints fans. I mean, to have a career that spanned 12 years, 350 games, so many wonderful performances at the centre of defence, so many wonderful games that you're involved with. I mean, I think the reality is, Klaus, we could probably do a whole series of interviews with you and we'd still only scratch the surface of your Saints career. So thank you so much for joining us. That's from me at the Saints FC podcast and all of our listeners who are going to tune in and listen to this. It's been an absolute honour and a pleasure to speak to you. And Klaus, I wonder if you have a message for our listeners and our fans.
Well, it's been a privilege to serve Southampton Football Club, to be a part of the Southampton family for so many years. I lived there for 14 years, and I will never forget it. It's been the best years of my life. So I'm just very, very humbled, and being loyal to Southampton for so many years. It's been incredible. So and the Southampton supporters are the best.